Okay, you crazy kids. um, this one is American Gothic episode 9, To Hell and Back. And this one, maybe on your playlist or like your DVD, is number 14, but it should be watched here at number 9 for like story continuity. Yeah. This is kind of a good one. We get to spend some time with our friend, Dr. Matt Crower. So yeah, let's just dive right in. We open on a pre-credits flashback that just sets up that the doctor is struggling with his feelings about his family's death. So if you guys remember, I guess it's kind of maybe a little bit hard to forget, because the sheriff mentions it all the time. Basically, the doctor was an alcoholic, and one time he was drunk, his wife and child were in the car, and something happened and he killed them, or he was driving when the accident happened. So he's like tormented by the memory of that, basically. Yeah, I kind of thought it was an interesting little opener. It's got a very dreamlike, sort of almost monochrome thing going on, and I was just thinking, wow, Caleb must have stayed home tonight, because so many of these openers are him and Boone like out late getting up to mischief. So we open on a auction for charity of some kind. The sheriff is in a suit for a change. So kind of miss that vest when he doesn't wear it. He always has a array of them. So yeah, the doctor's kind of feeling a lot of feelings, and the sheriff calls him one big asset, like he's an ass at, yeah, well, you get the idea. Basically, the doctor's contract is up on the agenda with the hospital board, and the sheriff wants to discredit him and get rid of him. He does not appreciate his presence. We meet somebody called Doreen, who we haven't really seen before. She's very flirty with the doctor, and her husband is an alcoholic and is drinking at this thing. And yeah, later we see Selena comes on an accident, and she has this bright yellow car. I was just thinking when I saw it, you don't see yellow cars anymore. There's also like this moment, I almost forgot to mention this, at the charity auction, where Caleb just really doesn't like apple pie. Like, this is like the second time it's been mentioned in an episode that he's like, I really don't like apple pie. What's wrong with apple pie, Caleb? What's wrong with apple pie? Anyway, so basically Doreen and her husband have been in an accident, and because it was a drunk driving accident, the doctor's like kind of, I guess, like triggered, or it's around the 3-year anniversary of his wife and child's death as well, so it's all kind of coming to a head. But whenever he just starts seeing patients in the hospital and having these like things where he sees his wife or his daughter's face, or like hears them talking to him and stuff, and he says something to someone where he says like the worst thing is that you don't have that moment where you can say goodbye, because Doreen's in a coma, and it reminds him of his wife being in a coma before dying. Yeah, so basically this isn't good. Doreen's husband is brought in by the sheriff, basically just so the sheriff can stand in the doctor's office and just taunt him for being an alcoholic, and he's like super smug about it, and it's just such a it's such a Sheriff Lucas Buck moment. Like, you just know he's been looking forward to this moment all day. When the doctor's not in the room, we learn that the sheriff told Chester, Doreen's husband is called Chester. You don't hear that name anymore. Basically, the sheriff put Chester up to driving home while drunk, and then he's just really chill that Chester is pretty much going to hang for it. The doctor at one point starts to look for a drink, like he's sort of, you can tell that maybe he's going to crack. And yeah, there's a moment in the bar apparently sometimes the doctor just goes and hangs out in a bar and drinks club soda. So it's really just a chance for Selena to stop by his table in this really nice red polka dot dress, actually. I think polka dots are very stylish. Yeah, so that's how we find out it's the 3-year anniversary since anything that matters. Like, I do feel really sorry for the doctor, but he's very, like, very intensely emo in this whole... I mean, you would be, don't get me wrong, but it's like... It's very dramatic, is what I'm trying to say. She tries to get him to drink and he doesn't take it, so then it's sheriff time. Basically, he does a thing where he just appears, and he sort of says he wants to make peace with Matt, but he kind of also admits that he just wants to get rid of him. So he offers him a chance to revisit his wife and daughter and make peace with them, and then just be like in oblivion, just to end the suffering they have to live with every day. So he basically gives him a drink that will send him back to the time so he can say goodbye to his wife and daughter, and then presumably I guess die in the accident is sort of the implication. But he says something interesting. He said to Gail as well that he didn't choose Trinity, Trinity chose him. So that seems to be like, I don't know if that's meant to be a clue or if it's just the sheriff being you know, kind of talking himself up a little bit there. So yeah, he goes back. He's in the car with his wife and daughter. His daughter gives him a letter that he puts in his pocket. And we learn that the previous night, apparently he got drunk and called his wife's dad a fascist. Can you imagine that, like, that party? Like, you've got your husband there and he gets so drunk that people have to step over him at the party, and then he calls your dad a fascist. Like, that's not great. So what we learn is that she was planning on leaving him, and because, you know, she just, nothing was improving and everything, and they got into a fight and she pulled the car over and sort of threw him out of the car, I guess. And then when she drove off, she was in an accident just after that, and so that repeats itself. But now that he's sober, he can tell that the accident wasn't his fault, or maybe couldn't have been prevented. So that's kind of interesting. I guess it alleviates his guilt to some extent, or maybe he's just a bit easier to live with. Yeah, so then we have a hearing of the board, whether they're going to renew the doctor's contract. And the sheriff's like, basically tells them that he's gone. But then, of course, the doctor appears in the doorway. Very dramatic. And he says, the sheriff's like, damn it, like, I thought I was rid of you. And the doctor, Matt Crower, is basically like, oh no, I don't want oblivion now. Now I'm going to take you down. It's not his exact words, but you get the idea. And on the way out, he still has the letter in his pocket that his daughter gave him in the vision. And then he has this moment. I find this kind of funny. So he sees this girl in a wheelchair, and it's supposed to be a moment where he smiles and then she smiles. But because of the lighting, he looks super creepy. So anyway, so that's our A plot. There's a small B plot that's quite nice as well, with Caleb. So there's a guy next door called Mr. Emmett, and he only comes out at night. And one night the kids see him dragging like a sack along. So they dare Caleb to go over and talk to him, and they tell him a bunch of rumors, and the guy's burying something in the pumpkin patch. And then it's a full moon, so he just screams at the moon. So, yeah, Caleb isn't brave enough to go over there. But the next day, he's hanging out with Gail in the garden, and she's planting poisonous plants, as you do when there are children around. She tells him not to spread, like, gossip or not believe gossip. And Caleb's like, I'm pretty sure he's burying people in the pumpkin patch. And I'm like, that's not unreasonable, because this is Trinity. Like, people do this here. So the next night, he then heads over there again, and it's all spooky sound design with, like, owls and stuff. The man catches him and we see like an open grave. But again, Caleb runs away. And then later, Gail kind of says to Caleb, you know, why don't we just go over there and talk to him during daylight, like good neighbors? And Caleb's like, no, why don't I go over there? So he does. And the guy next door, Mr. Emmett, kind of looks like he's dressed like a prospector in like a cartoon, you know, like kind of the like white beard and the old hat and stuff. Anyway, it turns out, and this is kind of sad, actually it's very sad, it turns out he was burying his pet dog, and he was like, this dog is the only friend I've ever had. And I'm like, my heart just like cracked. So apparently someone poisoned his pet, which is really just horrible. I felt really sorry for him. Yeah, and then Merlin is there, and the dog is with her, and she tells us that basically all dogs go to heaven. And then the dog just goes over and sits by Mr. Emmett, and then Mr. Emmett smiles like he can't see the dog, but he's somehow like comforted by his presence. Isn't that nice? My gosh, there's something like people losing their pets, you know, like breaks my heart. So yeah, I guess this show kind of likes to tell us that appearances are deceiving, which always reminds me of I was gonna say it reminds me of it, and then I forget the title. Harper Lee's book To Kill a Mockingbird, where that's set in the South as well, and there's people who are not outwardly respectable, or who are like, you know, there's all this town gossip about them, but then when you actually get to know them, they're often like really nice people, and that's kind of a theme here in this show as well. So there's that, and that's pretty much the episode. It's a good little episode. I like it because we get to spend some time with the doctor, and I think it gives him something like an out, so he's not just like this one note guy that gets stressed and, you know, is an alcoholic. It's like, you know, we kind of get a little personal growth or whatever. Yeah, I was thinking, you know, usually when I watch a TV show, there's like one person or something that just annoys me, or one aspect that bothers me. I'm not good at watching TV for that reason. And yeah, watching this, I pretty much like everyone, like quite a lot. I think the sheriff is really good. I think Caleb's really good. I really like Gail. I think she's a great character. I find Selena really fun because she's just kind of, I don't know, she's kind of great. So, and even Deputy Ben, good old Deputy Ben, poor man. I think he's just interesting, and so I don't know, I think it's a very solid show so far.